Okay, we're gonna get started. I wanted to take a moment before we get started and just thank everybody for coming. I'm new to Shallots here, just started in February, and I have an agricultural science degree at OSU. I'm very passionate about teaching people how to learn to garden in their own food. So you'll be seeing a lot more of me in these classes, hopefully. Definitely around Shallots, so get used to this face. My name is Angelee. I don't know if I said that. Angelee Calder. Nice to meet you all. Thank you for coming. And we're going to go ahead and get started with this presentation here. Oh. Thank you. All right. Here we go. All righty. Once again, everybody, thank you for coming. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit more about gardening onions and garlic and what you can do to make sure that you have success in that. By the end of this little presentation, I'm hoping that you all will be a little bit more confident and understand that it's a little easier than you might think. So with that, let's go ahead and get started here. So the very first thing you're going to need to know about picking or growing onions and garlic is where to start. And in order to do that, you're going to need to get your seed garlic, which it's time for that. We just got a shipment of that in at Shallots. We're still waiting on our onions, but garlic is here and it is go time. So, all right. So a few things to keep in mind is that size matters when it comes to picking your garlic bulbs. You know, the bigger the better. The bigger bulbs you can get, the bigger cloves, the bigger your bulbs will grow and you can harvest come spring. The health matters. You want to pick the nicest, healthiest looking one you can find with the skin still intact so that you can minimize your chances of contaminating it with, you know, disease or fungal issues. Like I said, we just got ours in at Shallots, and it is certified stock for our area, which means you know what the genetics you are getting are. The kind, you know, what you're getting is what you're getting. Yep. And every one you find here at Shallots is going to be certified for our hemisphere. It's great for growing here. And it's inspected for pests and diseases. So it's, you know, you're getting really good stuff with us. And, you know, there are two different types of garlic, technically. The hard neck and the soft neck. It is really important to know the difference between those two as you're going in to come pick them. If you're looking for something really spicy to eat right close to after harvesting, you're going to want to go with your hard neck. Because it's harder to store, it's easy to peel, and it's got that best spicy flavor that everyone loves from garlic. Very healthy, very good for you. The types that we have in right now that you see right next to the hard neck there, the German red, Spanish roja, Romanian red, German red, and oh, I got German red, sorry. And Russian red. We have all of those in right now. Those are real varieties that I just took the names off right off the shelf. If you're looking for something to store you and take you over through the summer into the fall, again, you're going to want to go for your soft neck garlic. That's going to have a really good storage yield. It's really great for braiding. And yeah, there's so many different varieties to choose from. You're not going to be disappointed with any one you pick. And what we have in right now, we have the late Italian, the early Italian purple, and the Nootka rose and silver rose. So And the elephant garlic is very exciting. It always gets a lot of attention because it is huge. I don't know if you've seen these cloves, but they are like the size of the palm of your hand, like huge. And they're really great. They're delicious. They're a little sweeter, I believe, than an actual garlic. They're technically not an actual garlic and more of a leek, but we won't tell him that because he's really delicious and you can grow him just like a garlic. So please feel free to take a moment, take a picture of the slide, write down the varieties that you are interested in. And this is what our bulk garlic seed area looks like at Chenard's right now. It's very gorgeous, very full. The price is like last year's prices, so sorry about that. It's a little bit more than that, not by much though. And what we have right now is going to be our best selection for garlic. So you're going to want to get in as soon as possible to get what you want, because things are going to start disappearing soon. All right. So there are different kinds of onion types that you're going to want to be aware of. Hold on, sorry. Checking. Yeah, sorry. So there's the short day, the long day, the intermediate. The intermediate, it's not dependent on light, so it's okay. Here in our hemisphere, in our area, we cannot grow the short day onions, so you have to be aware of that. Hold on, I'm just gonna see if I can't mute people. I heard somebody, if you wouldn't mind muting yourself, if I can't figure out how to. Let's see. All right, I don't hear him anymore. Thank you, sorry. So again, we can't grow short day onions here. We are generally going to be growing the long day. We're going to be carrying the long day or the intermediate. All right. So now getting into the nitty gritty. Garlic and onions, they're pretty easy, you know, winter crops here. They just need that full sun. They love their soil being well drained. And, you know, you got to go in there, got to work that soil, got to get your hands dirty, and you got to, you know, think about your planning. Good rotational backgrounds is always really great for any crop you can grow because it reduces your chances of pests and diseases. You know, if you have an issue with a certain pest that likes your tomatoes in one spot, they're going to know where those tomatoes are come next year. So you got to move them around, keep them on their toes. The specifics about garlic you have to remember is they need that soil to be well draining. They are not going to be tolerant of their feet being entirely too wet and saturated. They're also a little sensitive to pH. They love that neutral soil. So if you need to work it to make it become that neutral level, you can do so with the sulfur and lime. Additionally, the sulfur can help create better flavor and can help reduce your chances of pests and diseases by creating that good soil health. I already went there. Let's go to onion. So onions are a little more tolerant of those moist soils. So if you're thinking about, you know, the levels of your yard, if something's a little lower where you want to grow, you might want to put your onions in that lower area because they're more tolerant of that moistness, where your garlic should be on the higher level. And if you're, I just realized I have a misspelling I didn't correct in there. Garlic Drew, sorry about that. Anyway, if you're a little worried about your draining issues, you can create a mound with your soil above, you know, the level so that the water can run off and run through rather than creating a wet, soaking, saturated root space for your new little babies. Oh, and I forgot to mention, if anyone has any questions, you can go ahead and pop them in the chat there. And my co-host Darren, we all know Darren, he's very educated. He can go ahead and answer any questions. I might also open the chat room to questions in the end. So, how do I plant this garlic? Everything's a little different. So you're gonna want to take a picture of this or write it down because it's something you gotta know. It's very important. So the first thing you're gonna want to do is kind of dig like 6 inches below the top surface of that soil so that you can help promote the drainage. You can create some aeration for that water to move through rather than just getting stuck there. The bulbs, they're going to want to be 4 to 6 inches apart, about a hand length, and 2 to 3 inches deep. You're going to, I don't know if I mentioned this, but you don't plant the entire bulb. You're going to break off each clove, and each one of those is what you're going to plant 2 to 3 inches deep into the ground. Elephant garlic, because it's so much bigger, it's going to need a little bit more space. So you're going to want to make sure to give it that area it needs. And as you're planting, you're going to want to make sure to fertilize the ground with a granular fertilizer so that it's got the nutrients ready to go once it's in. Onions here, there's a few different ways. So I included them just in case if you're planning on starting some in the spring as well. But here we're mostly interested in the bulbs / sets because that's what we're growing here in the autumn. These ones you're going to want to plant 3 inches deep and 3 inches apart. Pretty easy. If you set them too close together, you can always pull green onions and some green soft garlic and eat them before they're mature. It's so delicious. And so we're going to throw some shallots in here too, because it's not just about the elephant garlic. Shallots, they're tiny, they're cute, they're delicious. So they're because even though they're small, they still need lots of space because they are bunching. As they grow, there's going to be a lot more space being taken up. So you're going to want to plant them at least 8 inches apart so they can have the space to grow. But other than that, you can pretty much treat them just like onions.
Have you gotten an email regarding that? Because usually on the email is the link to do that.
We got somebody on the microphone.
Hold on.
Darren, do you know how to mute them, or can you mute yourself? Boo, boo, boo. Oh, I'm looking in the wrong space, I think. I don't hear them anymore, though. That's fine. Thank you for coming. I appreciate you all. We're just in the middle here, so if you've missed something, this will eventually be uploaded to YouTube, so don't fret, don't worry. You can always go back and rewatch it. All right. Well, we're about halfway there, folks, Now the hard part is keeping care of them over the winter. It's super actually easy because it's a winter crop. You shouldn't really need to be watering them, which is super exciting. And as the temperatures drop come November, you're going to want to quit fertilizing them because their growth rate has significantly reduced with the temperature drop. So what you need to remember about feeding all 3 of these babies is organic fertilizer is always really great. We just like to note that. Use that at planting so that you don't burn anything. And then as you go on working your way into November, you can use your liquid fertilizer so that it's more easily, readily available to the plants. But come mid-November, it's too cold for them. They're going to really slow down in their significant growth. So you don't really need to fertilize them until February, when that temperature starts coming back up and you're going to see a lot more growth from them at that time. And that's when they're going to be really hungry and really going to need that fertilizer. So you're going to want to resume on a 2-week schedule after February hits. Here, this is 2 products that we carry at Chenard's. We've got this tomato, herb, and vegetable fertilizer. That's a granular. That's really great stuff to use as you plant. And then next to it here, we have this liquid all-purpose fertilizer, which is really great to be using come those colder months. All right, so this is all you got to do during the winter to make sure they're going to be happy and healthy. So you just got to make sure to control the weeds within 8 inches of them. That way they have all the space that they need to grow. You don't have to worry about it. And this includes cover crops, which a lot of people don't think about, but that could be considered a weed because within that 8 inches, you don't want it there. So at that point, it becomes a weed. So keep that out of there. The growth will be slow, but they still need that space. You're also going to maintain a 2-inch mulch layer over the top. And this will help keep them moist, but not saturated as you go in through the winter. I also wanted to note on flower scapes, as you start seeing those come up from your plants, the garlic ones, those are going to be just fine. But the onion ones can be detrimental to the yield and health of your onions. So you're going to want to cut those as soon as you see them. So keep an eye on them. Only water if you need. They don't want to be saturated. And you know, Oregon, we get a lot of winter rain here. So not a whole lot of irrigation going to be required during those winter months. Alrighty, everybody. That was the hard part. That wasn't so hard, was it? That's all it takes for taking care of them. The next thing you got to do is just keep your eye out for any issues you might have. These are a few of them: the gray mold, the white mold, the root rot, the rust, aphids, onion bulb, fly maggot. The best thing about all of these is prevention. You got to keep your plants as happy and healthy as possible so that they're able to fight these issues off. With onions and garlic, because they grow mostly in the underground, as soon as you notice any issue with these, it might be too late by then. So the best thing you can do is be on a great fertilizing schedule, make sure their feet aren't saturated, and have a good rotation schedule, because that's the best that we can do for our plants to make sure that they are going to be as happy and healthy as possible. So just, you take one thing out of this slide, prevention is key. Now the fun part, this is all what we're waiting for. The harvesting, the storage, and the eating. I love garlic. So you're going to want to really significantly reduce watering around the time of harvest. Once you start seeing yellowing leaves, that means it's about go time. That means it's, you know, the 2 to 3 weeks before harvest. If you're a little unsure about, like you didn't notice when leaves started falling or yellowing, when in doubt, 2nd week of June is the best time to pull these or stop watering. So on the garlic, you're going to see just the yellowing leaves. On the onions, the whole tops will just flop over. And that means it's time to go. It's time to pull them. It's time to go. So when you're getting ready to harvest, you're going to want to make sure that you do it on the morning time during a cool part of the day. You could do the evening as well. But when you're going in for it, you're really going to want to be gentle. You're going to want to not, you know, pull off the top green part from your bowl, because that's what we want. So as you're doing this, you pull your onion and your garlic from the ground. You're going to want to keep the roots and the dirt on there. And I know that's going to be very against everything that your guts are telling you, but it's going to be great for the long-lasting health of your garlic as it goes into storage. So after you get it from the ground, you're going to want to set that garlic in a cool, or not a cool room, sorry, just a dry, dark room to prevent any fungal issues from growing. You're going to want to let them sit in there for at least 2 to 3 weeks to cure and get ready. At that time, you are able to clip the roots and then slightly maybe brush off any extra excess dirt. But really, you're not going to want to get rid of the bulk of that dirt until you're ready to eat. And, you know, you can also braid your storage crops so that they're easier to grab and easier to store throughout the rest of the year. I do believe that we have some classes on garlic braiding, so make sure to go check out our YouTube channel for those types of things. And enjoy your garlic here. I would love to be able to open the floor to questions now, if we're available to do that, Darren. I'm very appreciative for all of you for coming today. I hope that you learned a little bit more about garlic and you're feeling a little bit more confident about going into it. And you're excited to see what kind of yields you can get come springtime.
Hang on a second. I'm finishing this chat on the elephant garlic corms, and then yes, you should be able to let me know if you have problems with trying some new security settings. You guys should be able to self-unmute and ask questions, and would be happy to talk about questions verbally at this point. And Tavia, I'm finishing a quick chat to you on your corm on your corm question, and then we'll talk about scapes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Central Florida. That's going to be a little bit of a different game there.
Yeah, so Central Florida, you're going to need to do short day onions, not long day onions, rather than the other way around. There's differences in climate and day length limit what we can and can't do.
In the scapes, I'm sure Darren is getting his way through to be able to answer that here. The onion scapes are detrimental to the onion health, so you're going to want to cut those off immediately as soon as you see them. The garlic scapes are not so detrimental.
And yeah, garlic scapes can be eaten. They can be stir fried, and they're beautiful that way. They have a kind of a green onion flavor with distinctive garlicky taste. Scapes on garlic don't make any substantial difference in yield. So if you were to plant a whole field of garlic and you took half the scapes off and you left half the field and you left the scapes on the other half of the field, and then you measured your overall yield over a couple of acres, you could tell a difference. It does slightly reduce your yield. For the home gardener, it's not significant enough to worry about, and it's a pain to try to go through and do or remember to do. So not usually worth doing. But if you like to eat them, please harvest them. Onion scapes, on the other hand, are they go all the way through the center of the bulb, so they actually create a storage rot situation. So when you see the flower scapes developing on individual onions, simply harvest those onions out and use them right away. They're still fine for immediate use, but they're not going to hold. They're going to rot from the inside out, and that's the big consideration there.
I'm also seeing a question. It reads, did you mean to say don't leave the total dirt? So I'm not entirely sure what I said, but what I meant to say is to leave the dirt on there. The dirt helps with creating storage, better storage for the garlics and onions. So you're not really going to want to take off the total amount of that dirt until you're getting ready to eat it.
Yeah, when you look at storage of these, one of the biggest risks to storage is having bruising or moisture against the bulb itself. So when they come out of the garden, leave all the dirt on, literally spread them out to dry and cure, about 3 weeks of curing. At that point, if you can't handle them sitting in the dirt for any of a number of reasons, either the untidiness or you've got a lot of it, just gently rub the dirt off after bulbs have cured enough to be not damaged by that, and including taking a couple of layers of paper off in the process. And then, but don't ever wash them. Getting that extra moisture in there is a real problem. So you can remove some dirt through the paper, and then you get the last bit of dirt off literally as you're prepping to cook. Absolutely.
So I got a question. When you're planting elephant garlic and you start with a bulb, it's got, say, 5 cloves, and the next year when you harvest it, sometimes those individual cloves that you planted don't actually form into a bulb consisting of 5 cloves. They form into a single, like a mono clove, like a one big bulb, I should say, like a single bulb. Is there a reason why that happens?
Most commonly, it's lack of available nutrition. And this is what, if you look back up in the chat, we're talking about growing some elephant garlic from corms, and that's a thing that happens occasionally, where you plant the little bulb bills, the smaller offset bulbs, and then you take 2 or 3 years to get them up to size to where they're actually producing true full-size bulbs again. Typically, if you separate out your elephant garlic, you space them the required distance, you should get a bulb that has 4 or 5, maybe as many as 6, but more commonly 3 to 4 to 5 actual cloves inside. And if you're not, usually it's a result of poor nutrition or poor soil conditions. So make sure your pH is close to neutral, to the slightly acidic end of neutral, but close to neutral. And fertilize well. All these alliums, onions and garlic, need lots of nitrogen. But you'd think they need more phosphorus, but they really need a lot of nitrogen.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Can they get the nitrogen from, I don't know, like eggshells, things like that? Can you hear me?
Yes, we heard you. I would say eggshells are not a reliable source of nitrogen for them, and I would recommend using a fertilizer at planting and then throughout growing.
Okay, thank you.
Do we ship orders? I'm seeing Darren. I don't know entirely about that. I know we do delivery, but shipping orders.
We can't ship. Yeah, we're not set up for that.
We're not set up to ship orders, so I'm sorry about that.
Sorry.
Where exactly are you?
Sorry, what was that?
Where exactly are you?
Oh yeah. So we are located in between Corvallis and Philomath on the Highway 34. And we are just across the street from the Bark Place.
Okay, thanks.
It's competition, but also
All right, so I see another question here about planting petunias over garlic and that may have caused an issue. And the answer is yes. Garlic does not appreciate competition. It wants that space around it, that 8 inches of space. And as well as a finish of watering, you know, as it's finishing that bulb, you need to stop watering, while petunias, they need that continuous water. So because of the issue with competition with garlic, there isn't really much for companion planting that you can do. We do recommend planting leafy like parsley crops afterwards, or nightshades like tomatoes, to continue that rotation in your crop.
So you, there was a mention of garlic mold, and I had to step away, and I'm not sure if it was covered, but when you end up planting your clove of garlic and then, you know, it scapes, and then, you know, whether you cut the scape off or not, but then you harvest it and the bulb is tiny. It's like the size of the tip of your finger and it's got some white mold on it. Is there a reason for that? And is there a way to get rid of that?
I'm clumsy and I kicked myself out of the class, so I had to come in here to field these. So small clove size can be a result of nutritional issues or too much water. If you're seeing a white mold, there's two white molds that you'll see. You'll see kind of a whitish gray rust, which is usually on the upper stems, or actual sclerotina, which is, they call it white mold, and that's on the bulbs itself between the paper layer and the bulb. Sclerotina is a real problem. It's one of the reasons we have to rotate alliums consistently, because it builds up in the soil. And then you can't grow any alliums in that spot for several years if you develop that in your soil. It doesn't go away readily. So good crop rotations are your first thing. Proper feeding and drainage are the next thing. But if you're seeing, like say, kind of a white mold layer between the paper and the bulb, you probably have a fairly significant problem that you need to not plant garlics or onions in that specific spot for several years.
Okay, and you said that white mold, when it shrinks the size of the bulb, is called sclerotina?
Sclerotina mold is the most common of the two bigger molds we get, and the more serious of the two. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, so question in the chat on fertilizing. So at planting, I like to use a granular organic fertilizer right in the trench, right where I'm planting, right at the base of the bulbs themselves. With an organic, you're not going to burn with that, and that's great. Subsequent feedings, we talked about, Angel talked about liquid feeding, but if you're doing granular feedings between the first planting and switching over to strictly liquid, or later in the spring, you'll just side dress them around the individual bulbs, or if you're doing a fairly tight row, just alongside the rows, and lightly incorporate it into the soil surface.
So if a person is using a granule fertilizer and you're working it around the bulb or alongside the row, and you're only working it in an inch, and those roots have the potential to go down anywhere between 18 to 24 inches, how long is it, you know, realistically going to take to get, you know, down to a point where the roots can readily absorb and uptake those nutrients?
It's not quick, and that's very much the case. That's why at the initial planting, I like to get that down there right at the root zone. The release period on a granular organic fertilizer obviously depends on how it's made. A lot of the commercial organic mixes, they release over a period of between 6 and 8 weeks, roughly, or 2 months or so, maybe up to 3. But you don't start seeing any results from them for about 10 to 14 days. So it does take a little bit of time to work its way down. And that happens, it's also dependent on soil biological activity, biologically inert soils, things that aren't really living very well, or cooler soils slow down that process some. That's why we tend to switch to the liquids for the late fall and then the very early spring feedings.
Got it. Thank you.
Lots of really great questions, everybody. I love hearing it.
We're at that point then.
I think unless anyone else has any questions, we're going to go ahead and end the class today.
One final question.
Yeah.
One final question. So, you know, in the fall, you plant the garlic, you know, you put lots of new compost and organic fertilizer in. Do you highly recommend that, you know, and then of course, after you plant, you mulch. And then of course, in the spring, you know, February, March, the garlic is up 6 to 8 inches out of the ground. Do you, like I say, recommend or highly recommend, you know, the removal of the mulch, putting down, you know, working in a granule fertilizer or top dressing with more compost, then putting down the mulch again? Like, do you recommend like that sort of a double feeding process?
So in my experience of growing it, it really hasn't been a huge issue to get that incredibly technical. If you're using a woodier mulch, something that's not very well composted, versus raking some native soil in as a dust mulch, or using a broken down, fully composted material as a mulch. If you're using a woodier mulch, you need to rake the mulch back, fertilize, put the mulch back over. If you're a fairly well processed, already decomposed material, putting it on top and just lightly incorporating it is just fine. It's not gonna make a significant difference. But that period from the latter part of October, roughly, in the fall into early November, where we stop feeding liquid feed, and then February, you'll notice the growth pushing out in Western Oregon as early as maybe Valentine's Day or so. I mean, mid-February, you'll notice that they're actually really growing again. Organic granular fertilizers are pretty slow in that low temperature range. So I'll usually liquid feed them with a liquid organic instead, once or even twice at about a week or 2 weeks apart, before resuming a granular feed to get them through, and usually put a granular feed down mid to late March. And that will then be enough to last them through to harvest in June to July.
What sort of a liquid are you putting on? Like what number? Like, is it a 12-12-12 or a?
I use an organic liquid. It's a 401 Gardner and Bloom Grow formulation. I want to make sure you focus on the nitrogen end of it. And I'm not a big fan of using synthetic fertilizers in the edible garden myself, but a balanced fertilizer is better than nothing. If you go to synthetic fertilizer that's a pure nitrogen, you're likely to burn with it. So balanced, if you're doing like a 12-12-12 or 10-10-10 is fine. Organics, those numbers will typically be around 4 or 5% nitrogen. Fish emulsion 511 is great. Yeah, I see that in the chat too. So now you had the same answer. Fish emulsion 511 is great for garlic. Very effective.
Have you ever used any sort of mycorrhiza or biochar in with the soil to enhance, root growth, uptake, nutrient retention?
I don't normally get too involved in mycorrhizing the garden because I have an active garden that I've been physically gardening and rotating and improving for about 25 years now in the same spot. I have a pretty good soil biology built up. You can get complex myco supplements, and that's fine. Biochar is always beneficial, does not usually need to be added every year. Do the whole garden, don't just worry about the garlic. It's kind of expensive per volume. I did my last batch of biochar on my vegetable garden 2 years ago. So those are definitely beneficial things. Instead of getting excited about mycorrhizae, I like to promote a mixed or a diverse microbiome in the soil. I tend to use humates, soil activators. So the humic acid will promote the development of additional or microbial activity in the soil, but it's not directly seeding specific microbes in the soil. And that's been a pretty effective way to enhance my soil's reactivity for organic gardening.
Okay.
Really great questions.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions left on here? Is everyone feeling confident? Ready to go garden?
One final question is, so some people will say, don't water your garlic. Other people will say, make sure you water your garlic fairly heavy, at least once a week. And, so there's these differing subtleties. And then of course, in my experience is that when it's been raining, we've had a fairly wet spring and a wet summer. I didn't water. My garlic was huge. And this past summer, I chose not to water and my garlic was a bit smaller. So is there sort of I'm going to call it a rule of thumb, or just like a light reference as to frequency that you water yourself?
Excellent question. Watering is always one of those tricky things, and it does vary tremendously. So what I'm talking about in my situation is I'm gardening in native soil, not raised beds. So my soil does hold a fair amount of moisture. Very seldom need to do any watering fall through the winter. We normally have quite adequate precipitation. Usually sometime in March to April, we'll have at least several dry days in a row. Pay attention to what your soil is actually doing. If you are going through dry periods, and real common in April and into May, where you really have to irrigate, typically on garlic, a good thorough soaking once to twice a week is a really good watering in native soil. In a raised bed, that's going to be more like every other day to have enough moisture consistently in that soil, but it does depend a lot on the precipitation. What is critical is as the growth develops, and of course, onions like a little more water than that across the board. So we're talking garlic here and there, but onions, more frequent watering, does not need to be particularly deep. They don't have a hugely deep root system. So the key thing with garlic, and to an extent with onions, is when they're beginning to dormant down, let them dormant down and don't keep water held against the bulb, because that inhibits the paper formation that protects the bulb. So usually sometime in June, you'll see your garlic beginning to yellow from the bottom up, despite consistent watering, despite fertilization. It's hitting the end of its life cycle. So when you've got the beginnings of that yellow progression coming up, just stop watering entirely until harvest, if at all possible. Sometimes in my garden, the way things lay out, we do get a little bit of water into the garlic during their ripening sequence, and it's usually detrimental to at least the storage and sometimes to the size. So consistency of watering doesn't need to be tons through the active growing part of it, but towards the tail end of the season, cut off water entirely.
Right, so not as much watering, but if it's in a raised bed, a bit more watering because of the fact that it's going to need it.
That's correct.
It's all about the soil.
There's no substitute for getting out and putting your hands in the soil and seeing where your moisture tables are. That's the best answer I can give you on watering, because it does vary tremendously from location to location.
Got it. And then is it important to make sure that you water for a certain number of minutes to make sure that that water gets down the 18, 24 inches where the roots are, or will it be sufficient if it gets down, if we're planting a bulb or a clove 3 to 4 inches deep, is it sufficient that if the water, watering down 6, 7, 8 inches?
You want your water to be penetrating down to the base of the bulbs where the root systems are. So but it's usually 5 or 6 inches of depth. Less again on onions because they're shallower. Shallots, similarly shallower. So it does depend on how you're applying that water. With a sprinkler system, that might be 20 to 30 minutes of run time. With a drip system, that's probably about an hour of run time.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. All right, everybody, I'm going to go ahead and close out the class now. Thank you all for coming, and I hope to see you again soon.